firstly, everybody, welcome to the MDL Weymouth race. Thanks very much to MDL Marinas for sponsoring. There's a planned get-together at about 6 p.m. tomorrow at Weymouth Sailing Club, but I'll just keep an eye out in the WhatsApp for any updates on that, because it's likely many of us are still going to be sailing then. JOG members can get a discount from MDL. If you check in the members benefits pages, you can see it all there. As you know, if you've been to one of these briefings before, JOG members also get a 20% discount on a Predict Twin subscription as well. So weather-wise, at the synoptic level, there's a high pressure system sitting right over the English Channel for most of Saturday. That's going to bring very light and variable winds. Initially, early morning towards the start, apologies, it's just decided to update there. Early morning towards the start, it's looking like it's going to be a southwesterly, so it'll be a beat out the Solent down to Bridge Buoy. Later on in the day, it looks to be backing and strengthening, which will be good. And probably as we're coming in towards the finish, we should hopefully all be flying kites with a southeasterly in a 7-knot breeze or so. Beyond that, there's not really a huge amount more to say about the weather, except that it will be light and variable, and that I think there might be quite considerable land effects, especially around the entrance to the Solent, which we'll just want to bear in mind. Course-wise, so you've probably all heard about the amendment to the start line. So instead of starting off Cowes, we'll be starting off, it's called 2 Bravo Dunford, which is a yellow buoy, off Lymington. It's for one between the Red Can, Lymington Bank, and the Red Post further inshore. The other end of the start line will be the J109 Just So. It's easy to spot. It's got Just So written in big letters on the side of it. So hopefully no one's going to struggle with that. So we still need to go through the identity gate. The identity gate is you pass within 100 metres of the stern of Just So, just as you would the identity gate of Cowes. So please have show your sail number, so have your mainsail up with your sail numbers so that they can check you in. So after the start, first starts at 9:30, last starts at 10:15, in the usual 15-minute gap between the starts. I'm going to start and head west or southwest out the Solent. Got Hurst Castle to the north of us and the Isle of Wight to the south. I think around Hurst Castle and between Hurst Castle and the Isle of Wight, there's likely to be slightly unusual winds just due to because it's so light, the flow is going to be very unpredictable around these headlands, more so than if it was stronger winds. Tide-wise, the tide should be flooding across the course. I'd just be a bit wary if you're a class 4 start, it's possible that there'll be patches of foul tide. It's best just to keep an eye out on the water, to see if you can spot them, because they'll be creating ripples where they're meeting the fair tide. So it's best to try and stay in the fair tide, obviously. Coming down the Needles Channel, as usual, strongest tides normally on the north side. If you try and stay on the line between the buoys, if it's southwesterly, we're going to have to be beating. But if you try and optimise so that you're probably heading more south than you are west on the beat, that'll try and keep you in the best tide on the north side. Leaving Isle of Wight to port and Bridge Buoy to starboard. I did do some routing earlier. I forgot to put the marker in for the Isle of Wight and ended up routing me all around the eastern side of the Isle of Wight to get to Weymouth. So it's if you are using Predict Wind, you can basically put in gate marks so that you go between them. After Bridge Buoy, it is a run line just round Delston Head and St Albans. Generally, the best tide is in a line drawn from sort of the Needles to Delston Head. If it's still southwesterly when we get here, some people might be thinking, oh, I had a bit offshore to get better tide when I tack back to head west. I personally wouldn't do that, because I think the wind is meant to back, so you'll be getting lifted anyway, and I'm not sure it's worth the extra distance. Rounding Delston Head, you've then got St Albans Ledge. So if it's wind against tide, it can be quite rough here, but I don't think we're going to have a problem with that, given how light the wind is. Then heading along the coast, I think some of the nicest coastline in the UK to sail along between St Albans Head and Weymouth. Nothing particularly navigationally significant. I think hopefully by this time we'll all be rumlining it on a reach or a broad reach in towards the finish. And then finishing between the pole on the pier, which may or may not be that mark there, I'm not sure. It'll be much easier to sail in reality. And the southeastern range buoy, which is that one. So the distance is 37.5 miles, which is obviously somewhat shorter than the original planned course. At this point, I will just show you what the routing looks like, and then I'm going to hand over to Will, and he can talk you through the details of each leg.
Before we've got that, Will, there's a hand up from Anthony Nayland.
Range-wise, the honest answer is I haven't checked the ranges, but it's obviously worth double checking just to make sure for yourself. I'm sure Jog wouldn't send us through the middle of a range, but it's obviously worth checking yourself. If anyone can provide an answer, that'd be brilliant. And apologies for sounding so unprofessional. Over to you, Will.
Thank you very much. So if we we'll start with the start line. We've got, I think, a completely different picture and start strategy between classes 4 and 1, and classes 2 and 3 in the middle are going to be some combination of it. So with the start line being, as mentioned, as per the amendment, between the yellow can and just so, the probable location of the boat is north of the buoy. So for class 4 especially, that will be a very good indication, because at that point the tide will almost definitely have turned inshore, and the tide offshore may still be foul and running east. So keep an eye on the boat as a good indication of which way the tide's running and where it's hanging to anchor. And then sort of, especially from a class 4 point of view, as you get closer to Hurst, the back eddy, it will be 100% turned sort of from a back eddy off Hurst spit to sweep you round out of the channel. I think given the timings, it should be turned by the time everyone gets to the gap, across the whole gap, but dependent on wind, tide, etc. Again, as already mentioned in direction, expecting a southwesterly with probably a reasonable amount of tidal assist, certainly as the day builds, which will add a good 2 or 3 knots to the apparent as we go out the Needles Channel. Tidally, we've sort of, talked through the Needles Channel before, but strongest tide along the bank. Again, I agree with the summary we had that can be some very interesting and fluky winds in there. So as sort of always with these things, eyes out the boat, keeping an eye, and also bearing in mind, you don't want to be in a position you're getting swept onto something. So keeping well clear of the shingle, well, keeping yourself in a position where if you run out of wind, you don't get swept onto either the Needles buoys or the shingles, and making it through the gap as it's nice, clearly illustrating the routing, Needles to port, bridge to starboard. So once you get to the Needles to Anvil Point is probably the leg with the most tactical options in the race, and probably going to be the critical, as I see it, I think it's probably going to be the critical leg, because with the tide turning against, any gains and losses in this leg will be amplified later down the course. So there are a few different competing options. If you look at the weather forecast with the high pressure, there is some indications that the north edge of the course has more breeze. It's not reliable. I wouldn't count on it until I see it out there, but it's worth sort of bearing back in mind. With the temperature we're expecting, sort of 15 to 20 degrees, reasonably sunny tomorrow, there's a chance of some thermal reinforcement to the southwesterly. Again, I've not seen anything too strong so far this year. It's still reasonably early in the year to get anything thermal. It's still a bit up in the air. Tidally, you want to make sure you don't go too far north. But I think with the wind direction, even if you come out straight out round bridge, put it on port and sail across. It will look like the routing's in front of you. So I don't think there'll be any way you'll be forced too far north. Tidally, try and stay on the line between the points. It would be worth, when you start getting towards Anvil and Albans, as all the routings are showing, tucking in to get the strongest tide. It's been a little bit since I've been around those points, but off the top of my head, it's about, if you're about sort of 100 to 300 meters off, was normally quite an optimum point. So with that all said, my view from Needles to Anvil is you probably go out in the southwest or south and just put the boat on port, get it going as fast as you can, go across. And see what it is, the sort of classic saying, sail the long leg first, because with the wind, as said, due to clock south, then southeast, and then maybe even east, you don't want to put in starboard and find yourself overstood, because that'll be distance you sail pretty much at night in the southwesterly, pretty much at 90 degrees to the where you're trying to get to. So we'll end up being wasted spent distance. So yeah, I think come out, put it on port, sail as sort of as you can towards Anvil. I'm not saying don't put starboard, but that's my advice. And then sort of keep a good eye out wind, because with the wind, especially as you get closer to the land, sort of coming into the points here, there are definitely going to be bands of stronger and lighter wind. It's going to be very fluky and patchy. Also, the whole week's been going on, this shift to the south, and then the wind coming in from the east has got earlier. Most of the latest forecasts I've seen had it around 5, 6 p.m. When we were talking 2 days ago, it was 5, 6 a.m. Sunday morning. So if it's going to move anyway, it might come in a smidge earlier, but again, keep your eyes out, keep looking. Then when we sort of get towards Anvil and then St Albans, a lot of it's going to depend on exact timing. Hopefully with the course set up and the wind, we're going to be in a position where everyone makes it round Albans before the tide turns. If you're in a position that you're not going to make it round Albans before the tide turns, you need to be thinking about that in advance. So if you're half a mile offshore and the tide starting to turn, you need to get a leg in, because I've been up there. There is a reasonable amount of tidal relief in the little bay you can see between Anvil and St Albans. A word of warning, it is very rocky in there. So keep a clear eye on. Then once you're, so there are isolated rocks and things off there, the standard hazards of a cliff, but keep eyes out and keep an eye on your chart plotter. And it's up to you how close you go if you're trying to beat the tide. When you get to St Albans, if you've got the tide with, no real decisions, straight line it to the finish. Hopefully either, as said, by that point, a reach or even a sort of broad reach. And down that leg, depending as it gets later in the day, think about when the easterly wind is going to kick in. So obviously what you don't want to do is, you want to stay on port so that you're doing the jibe as late as possible as it clocks around to the east. So you take the lift, and then jibe across as late as possible. On the other hand, if you get into St Albans as the tide is starting to turn or has turned, it runs very strongly off the point. What can pay, depending on the exact conditions, is to put a leg a couple hundred meters, half a mile in so that you get out of the line between St Albans and Portland. And if you can get out of that line, you get a dramatic amount of tidal relief. So if it's light and it's tide's turned against, tucking right around the point, going north, and almost sailing perpendicular to where you want to go. Only a couple hundred meters, but get out the tide if you can there. And then coming into the finish, I think a lot depends on what the wind's doing. If it's swung to the south, I think it should be fine. If it's running southeast, I think it should be fine. Obviously, if it's still in the southwest, there's a lot of obstacles for the wind to get over. So you've got the bill itself, you've got the big walls around Portland, and I'd expect it to be very light and fluky as you start coming in here. Better in an easterly, but then again, it's still blowing all the way over all of Studland and sort of from pool. So I think it's going to be very light and fluky as you come in here, and keep an eye out on various things. So that's everything I had on my notes list. I'll open it up. Is there any questions?
A couple of questions there about the range. So a couple of people have checked the range. There's no firing on Saturday or Sunday, so no issues with the range this weekend. Weather-wise, Sunday on the way home, rather irritatingly, it's blowing quite strongly from the east, which is classic, I think. Up to 20 plus knots from the east on the way back. I was planning on leaving relatively early on Sunday morning, just to try and have a positive tide, positive flood tide as far as possible, which will be flooding to about, I guess, 11 o'clock, 11:15. Maybe a bit of a stretch to get in the Needles then, but that's what we're going to try and do.
I think on the wind, so that is the point that I hadn't got on my notes that I was going to mention, is being down in Lymington today, it's blowing quite strongly from the southwest. So it sort of dies off about 10 o'clock tonight. So I would expect it to be reasonably flat, but that's the other risk if you start going too far south out into the channel. If you were 10 miles offshore, I would expect there still to be a bit of swell coming in. But in the areas we're sailing, I would expect the swell to have dropped off. But that's the other thing to bear in mind looking up the course. If you can stay in the flat water, that will dramatically help in the light.
Question, is this recorded and can I send it to someone else? Yeah, so this is recorded and it is available on YouTube, I think almost straight away after it's finished. So if you just Google jog in YouTube, probably Google Jog University actually, because that will probably give you much better quality results than jog, because you'll get a load of jogging and you should be able to find it relatively easily there. Just comment from Martin as well. There's some doubt as to whether the DG range finish buoy is on station, but we will get a WhatsApp notification regarding that to let us know. I'll just keep an eye on the WhatsApp group, because with the wind as it is, you never quite know what may or may not happen during the day. So it's always worth keeping an eye on that, especially around any where we might be having a drink afterwards and a prize giving. As usual, comms start and finish are on VHF channel M137A. If you do retire, please let the race officer know via mobile or VHF. And in the sailing instructions is the link to join the WhatsApp group if you haven't done so already. And as usual, if you could just take your own finishing time as well as getting finished by the finishing team, just to avoid any uncertainty about your finishing time, that would be appreciated. Are there any more questions? If not, well, I think we'll hang around for another few minutes, so anybody can feel free to ask a question. But if there's no more comments, a question's just arrived. Drinks on board Sunday's Child, whatever time you finish. Thank you very much, Phil and Martin. So Sunday's Child is an oyster, and it should be pretty easy to spot. I'm sure it'll have a lot of jog flags on it. So see everybody there. As I was saying, if anyone's got any questions, please ask. Will and I will hang around for a few more minutes. But if not, please go and enjoy your evening. Well, are you going down to a boat tonight?
I'm with my parents in Lymington, so.
Nicely arranged for you, bit of a lion.
No, got to be out there early for the first starts. Yeah, well done on finishing Cherbourg in that long race.
Yeah, it was getting emotional at the end. We thought if you went home and Jacana went home, we were going to go home too, but then the wind filled in, so we didn't.
Yeah, as always, 1 hour after we retire.
Yeah. No, I had the same thoughts as you. As I was like, if we leave now, we can make the Needles with tide.
Yeah, and especially being a Lymington-based boat, making the Needles means you're home. So that's why we'd set 5 a.m. as the decision point.
Yeah.
And about 4:45, we made the decision, put the engine on, and motored home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny, I thought we motored home on the Sunday. I thought we had loads of fuel, and Turns out we were on fumes at the end.
We were having a look today, and there was less left in the tank than we thought there was. So we started from mid-channel.
Yeah. Because in Cherbourg there's quite a good self-service fuel pontoon. But when we went there like late Sunday night to fill up, and it was out of service. So we're a bit like, oh, painful. But we had spare fuel on board, and I was like, oh, we'll be all right. But there's a little bit of wind.
Okay, well, I don't think any more questions coming. So I'll see you hopefully in Weymouth tomorrow evening for a drink.
Yeah. Cheers, Will. Take care, mate.
Bye.